If you are an entrepreneur in any way, shape, or form, and you run a Facebook group, then today's episode is for you. My friend Sarah is incredible at Facebook groups, engagement, finding clients, being a thought leader, and she's going to break down how to show up effectively in your Facebook community without it taking over your entire life. So grab a notebook and enjoy. Hey friend, welcome to Milk and Honey with Lemon. The Bible says in Numbers 14:8, and if the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us safely into that land and give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey. On this podcast, we talk about stepping into that overflow that God has for us by becoming those ultimate Proverbs 31 women. Hey, I'm Lemon. I am just like you, sister friend. I knew God had something more in store for me, but I couldn't see a way out of the laundry piles. And frankly, I resented that Proverbs 31 woman. How was I going to live up to the hype? That is until I found out how to really step into becoming this Proverbs 31 woman through leadership development. In this podcast, you're going to find financial freedom, leadership growth, and motivation so you'll be able to do all the things God has called you to do with ease and really step into that land of milk and honey. Welcome back to the Milk and Honey podcast. I'm your host, Lemon Price, and I'm so excited because I have my friend Sarah with me. We've been talking so much, and you guys can read her full bio, and I just said it in the intro, but she's amazing, and she's going to come talk to us about Facebook groups because I am notoriously bad at them. And if you're in my Facebook group and you're listening to this, I'm sorry. Hopefully things get better after a conversation. I have my notebook ready. If you don't have a notebook, go pause me, go get one. Because you're going to want one, because I know she's going to share things that are going to blow your brain cabin away. So thanks for being here, Sarah, friend.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so ready for this. I'm excited.
I am excited. Okay. How did you even get into Facebook groups? Like, how did that become the thing for you?
Oh, yeah. That is a fun story as well. We were just talking about fun stories when we were just chatting for my podcast. Yeah, another very interesting story. I did not plan to start a Facebook group for my business. I started my business like peak COVID when I was at home and I was like, oh, I need something to do because my life sucks and I have no purpose. And so anyway, that's when I started business. And I was going along and I was starting to try to do social media marketing. I was on Instagram. I don't have Instagram anymore because I'm so bad at it. But I was like, okay, everyone's on Instagram. Let's do Instagram. I was just trying to do social media things. And eventually I was like getting on Facebook in some other Facebook groups. And I was like, oh, Facebook groups are pretty cool. I like this. We get to chat. We're making connections. It's a lot of fun. Should I start a Facebook group? I don't really know. And I kept feeling like God was saying, yeah, okay, we'll do a Facebook group. I feel like you need to do a Facebook group for Christians. And I was like, all right, but I don't serve Christians only in my business right now. Is this a future thing? Maybe this is like a future thing, God. Okay, cool. I'll put it in my brain. I'll write it down on a note paper somewhere. We'll come back to it later. Fine, thanks. Got the note. We'll leave it for now. And I was just doing my thing. Because at the time I was a copywriter and I was just like, I'll serve anyone that will pay me. I had no idea of a niche because I wasn't taught to have a niche. So I was just like, I'll just do anything for anyone. That's fine. Hire me. Which doesn't work. Let's just clear that up. That does not work unless you're like super big name and everyone knows who you are and they're ready to hire you no matter what. That approach, it does not work. But I didn't know that yet. I was like 4 months into business. It's fine. So anyway, it just kept coming onto my mind. I was like, you have to do this Facebook group. And I was like, I'm really not sure. So I remember talking to a mentor about it, just like one of my spiritual mentors. And I was like, I feel like God's saying to do this, but I don't know. I don't really know what I'm doing. But anyway, I was like, okay, I'm just going to start it. I'm just going to start it because it's not leaving my brain. It just keeps coming back. So clearly that's me. That's God saying, focus on this. Hear me, do the thing. So I was like, okay, I'll start the group. And anyway, it was up and down. I was experimenting, following what other people were trying to teach about Facebook groups. And some of it worked. Some of it didn't really work. And after a while, it was growing, but it wasn't making me any money. People were joining and people were having conversations, but it wasn't profitable. And part of that was my actual offers were all off. So I had a lot of soul searching in my business to do. But it came to a point where I was feeling like it just wasn't working because people were not signing up to work with me. And I was having like this existential crisis. And so I actually just gave my group away to someone else for 5 months. I was like, nope. Clearly, this is not for me. I think I misheard you, God. Sorry. I'm just going to give this group away and go do something else. And so I made arrangements. Someone took the group over and I just walked off to go do some other things. And then anyway, thank goodness God is God and was like, hey, what a stupid thing you just did. Go get your group back. I'm like, okay. So I went and got my group back and I had this whole new perspective. And I think that break was, although it was terrible, it was actually really refreshing in a way because I had this whole like new understanding of, wow, I wasn't serving my group well. I wasn't stewarding it the way that I should have been stewarding the group. I understand what I want to be doing with my business a little bit better. So I'm a little bit more focused. And I was just focusing on building the community, right? I was like, my offers are a little bit all over the place right now because I'm not sure what I'm doing money-wise. So I'm just not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to focus on showing up, on serving them well, on loving them well, and building this community. And that's when it really started working. It took off. The group has been growing. It's been growing a ton now. I think we're over 1,500 members now. And about 800 of that has been in the last 4 or 5 months, which is crazy. But it's really growing now because things are in place. Things are working. I've obviously done a lot of trial and error and figured out the things that didn't work and the things that work for me at least. And it's been a lot of fun. And so eventually I was like, hey, I'm getting a lot of questions about Facebook groups. People are asking me how to do Facebook groups. And they're like, I love your community. I love your community. And so God is, again, just nudging on my brain like, hey, maybe this is the thing that you should be focusing on. This is super specific. This is one tiny little thing that you can help make a difference in. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, that's it. Let's do the one little thing and do it well. And so that's how I got into Facebook groups, teaching it, because it's been like I say, a bit of an up and down, sideways, roundabout journey, because that's how life works. And we all make mistakes and we do things that we don't know and we don't understand. But God redeems, God brings us back and moves us forward and shows the path, even when we're not sure what that path is.
I love that story because it was the same thing for me. God was like, time to start a Facebook group, and it grew fast. I think I had 900 requests in a 2-day time period. Like, it was good.
Wow.
And then it's just been sitting there. Like, it actually hasn't moved like since at all. And I get requests, but then people leave or accounts go inactive or whatever. And so it's just been sitting there stuck. And I'm like, I've taken breaks, and then I'm like, I'm going to come back and really engage and serve. And then nobody engages. And I'm like, it's demoralizing a little bit when you show up and nobody engages with you.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you deal with that emotionally? But then how do you also talk to people? Because I know everybody's so sick of the @followers, @highlight, @everyone.
Yeah.
I see that all the time too. So I would love your like thoughts and feelings on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm very sparing with those tags because I did actually ask my group at one point. I was like, how do you feel about these tags? Everyone's using them. What do you think? And I got them to give me some answers, which was interesting. So it's a really good way to do that. Actually, just ask your group how they feel about things. And then if they like it, you can use it. If they don't like it, don't use it. But I think for me, I really had to train myself to just not look at anything that I was posting unless someone left a comment on it, because otherwise I would get upset if there were no comments. And I had to just train myself to do that, because for the longest time, when you're growing a group in the beginning, people have to learn how to interact, right? It's like trying to teach your kid to talk. They don't talk forever because they don't know how to. And then they try, but they don't do it well. And then eventually it clicks in their brain. They're like, okay, I know some words. Oh no, now I know some phrases. Now I know some sentences, and it builds on each other. And I feel like a group interaction is the same way. People will look to see how other people interact, which when in the beginning, when nobody's really interacting, it's like they've got nothing to model. So they're like, oh, I don't really know what to do or say. I feel a little uncomfortable. So it's really tricky to get over that hump. But the best way to get over that hump is to consistently show up and don't look at any of your own posts until people actually comment on them, because otherwise you're just going to see, oh, I posted and no one responded. Oh, I posted and no one responded. Like, there's a ton of stuff, even in my group, that is pretty engaged that still doesn't get any responses sometimes. And I don't even notice, because if people don't comment, I don't even look at it. I schedule everything in advance. I do it when I'm feeling excited, when I'm feeling like very creative. I do all my work in advance. I schedule it all out, and then it's there. And if people respond, amazing. We're going to have a conversation. If people don't respond, it's fine. Maybe it just didn't land with them. And I think that's the only way that I've been able to get through that, because otherwise, in the beginning, I was so upset every time I posted something and people didn't engage with it. I also had to realize so few people ever see it. And that makes a huge difference. And I don't know if this has always been the case or if this is a new feature. I'm trying to remember back to when I started my group, but it now shows you how many people have seen the post or how many people view the post. I'm trying to remember when that came about, but it's so tiny. Depends on the post. A lot of my posts now, around 30% or maybe 40% of my group will see it, but it's pretty common in the beginning for that to be 10% or under if people are not highly engaged. So if 10 people are seeing your posts or 100 people are seeing your posts, then there's only so much that's ever going to happen. So especially when the group is small, if you only got 100 people in there, if one or two people see it and that particular person doesn't want to engage, then that doesn't mean your whole group is doomed. It just means that one particular person didn't like that post, and that's just how it goes, which is really unfortunate. So I think that understanding that's what's happening helped as well, because I didn't feel like it's not me. It's just the fact that people didn't see it, or it's the fact that it was maybe a not good time of day, I always notice things like on Sunday mornings. Obviously, people don't respond as much on Sundays because thankfully they're busy at church and doing things with their families and they're not sitting on their phones. But I had to realize, it's like, why does nobody want to answer these posts? Oh yeah, it's Sunday morning. They're at church at a time that I'm not at church because it's first thing in the morning for me. It's a different time zone. Or even on Saturdays, time zones can play a big factor in that as well, which is, so I think, yeah, that's a very long answer to that question. But I think just like understanding how people interact on social media in terms of the times of day they're on, the way the algorithm works or doesn't work, just helped me kind of be a bit more objective with my posting. Because yeah, if you're going to get emotional about it, you're going to get, like you're saying, you get a bit deflated, you get disheartened, and it doesn't really motivate you to continue. But the only way forward is to continue. And if you don't continue, then you're never going to get to the other side of the hump, right?
I love that answer because, yeah, I have a background in marketing. And so I know all of these things, but I feel like it's so different when you're like in it and you're like, why is this not landing? Or I said this to you before we started recording, like the only time people engage really, sometimes when I drop a new podcast episode or resource do I get engagement. But you better believe when I let them shamelessly sell Friday, blows up. But I'm like, I know you guys are here then if you're seeing that post. So yeah, I would love to talk about that, right? Like they're not engaging with necessarily the value-based stuff. But when I give them the once a week opportunity to promote themselves, like then they're like, oh, I'm here. Yeah. Everybody's around.
Yeah, I know. I think it happens in every single group where that's the case. And it's funny because some people do use that as a strategy. Oh, you can just promote all the time in the group because I want the engagement. And those groups end up being actually more dead because they've got more posts, sure, but then there's still no comments or conversations happening in the comments. It's one of the things I look at when I'm deciding if I want to join a group is, okay, what's the comment interaction? I don't care how many posts there are. I want to see if people are in the comments talking with each other because that's what's really important to me, at least. And yeah, one of the things that I found made the biggest difference in engagement for my group is questions. This is one of the things I teach in my program. So you're getting a little sneak preview of all the things that I teach, but questions make a huge difference because if you think about having a conversation in person, you don't just say something and leave a statement and then walk away, right? Like you ask someone a question and then they answer. And then you ask them another question and then they answer. And then you ask them another question, they go answer. And like you learn about that person by picking out information, by asking them more and more questions. And then maybe they return the favor. They say, what do you think about this? And then they start asking you all the questions. And that's how conversation works, right? It's a series of questions and answers. And I feel like replicating that in social media is the best way to have those conversations, is just asking people to answer questions or ask people to ask questions, because that's how conversation is formed. We don't really form conversation by just declaring a statement and be like, all right, here's my statement. And then we walk off. I think it's like it's one of the things that I find like very strange about Twitter as a platform is it's just a platform where people make statements and then just go away. And it causes a lot of arguments because people don't really want to have a nuanced conversation. That's a whole different thing. But it's a platform of statements a lot of the time. And anyway, that's a whole side conversation. So yeah, try asking a lot of questions is my biggest piece of advice. If you're struggling with engagement, you're struggling with getting people to interact, ask them a bunch of questions because people will always want to talk about themselves. People are very selfish unintentionally. It's just like we like to talk about ourselves. We like to talk about our lives and share our thoughts and opinions and feelings and share what we know and what we think we know and what we want to know. And so we love to talk about the things that are on our minds. And so the quickest way to get people to talk is to ask them to talk.
I love that because that had me thinking then about the membership questions, right? I ask my people very specific questions when they join and I try to be very friendly about it and stuff. So how do you utilize I'm going to assume that you utilize the membership questions and stuff, but like how does that play a huge factor into your content strategy and all of those kind of fun things?
Yeah, for sure. I use my questions to get information from people. I'm asking them about, you can ask them like pretty much anything that you want to know, but you want to make sure that you have them set up to get that information from people. It's so important because not everyone's going to answer them, but the majority of people will give you some kind of an answer when they're requesting to join, which is really nice. I feel like it's probably, I get about 50-60% of people that actually answer the questions these days now, which is good. So it's a lot of great information. So you can ask them about who they are. You can ask them things about what they're trying to accomplish. You can ask them about their goals, their dreams. You can ask them things that they're struggling with. Like all of these things can become content that you can then use in the group. And I find that when I actually create content based on the questions that I get or the answers I get to those questions, it gets a little bit more of a response because that person, I'm not necessarily using their questions or answers word for word. Someone will say, oh, I'm really not sure how to set my group up properly. And I'm like, oh, let's do a live. Let's talk about how to set your group up properly. And then that person who answered that question is, I really want to know this because I had that question. I still have that question. I want to know the answer to this thing. And so they start to participate, and maybe it's just watching. And I think that's the other thing. We were just talking about this as well, right? A lot of people watch and don't necessarily interact, which is so frustrating. And you can see that in your groups, right? When they're answering some things, but they're not answering others. It's, they're there. They're just not doing things, but it's reassuring to know that they are still seeing things, even if they're not outwardly engaging. They're still engaging internally, which I think is still really important because even if they're not ready to share or they're not sure how to share, they're thinking about it. Maybe they're answering questions in their head. Maybe they're putting that response in their mind and then just not typing it out either, because that can be something that happens as well. Yeah, I lost my train of thought there, but I hope that made sense.
No, that is so good. Yeah, because I would love to know like how you organize your answers, because I used to have a really good spreadsheet system. Then I had group funnels for a while. And then I was like, this is all just so much. And now I'm like, I'm the worst. Sarah's going to kill me when I tell her what I do. I literally screenshot it and just keep it on a folder in my desktop. And I'm like, this is not very organized. I at least copy their email address before I approve it, but I screenshot it and I just leave it in a folder on my desktop. And I'm like, I will get to this. I don't know. That's a great method.
No, you want it searchable. You need to have it on some sort of spreadsheet, because then you can search it and actually use ChatGPT to give you some analysis. I just did that the other day and it's so good. Because I have in my spreadsheet, I use Group Collector now to get all this information because it's like a one-time fee. I think I got it through, what's this app, Sumo conglomerate, where they have like super cheap deals on tech, and they had Group Collector for super cheap. So if you want Group Collector, go check that out because you can get it for 60-70% cheaper than you would from the regular website. Fun tip that I discovered. Amazing. But it just puts it all in a spreadsheet. And I literally copied the information from the spreadsheet and asked ChatGPT. I'm like, hey, what are like the most common answers here? Because I don't want to search through this. Like, that's way too much information. There's like 400 or 500 rows of information here now. Like, just you tell me, fancy AI, what are people saying to me here? Because I think fantastic way to use AI. I'm not a huge fan of AI, but for doing very menial things like tell me the most common responses, fantastic. Saves a ton of time. I'm sure there's something within spreadsheet that you could do, map out a graph or something. I have no idea. But yeah, keep it in a spreadsheet so you can search it and do things like that, because it's really, you don't want to do anything that's going to take up more time than it has to.
That's good. Yeah. See, I need to do that. It's like on my list of things to do. I'm like, I will get to it eventually. But yes, this is good. I need to do that because I love that you're like, analyze it too. And then you can have like, and I think it helps people feel seen too when you're answering like their
specific questions. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's easier to build relationships. So how are you? Because I feel like that's been a challenge for me too. It's building relationship like with people in my group, right? Because maybe there's 1,000 people in there. I can't be friends with them all. And so sometimes they don't see my messages or like they see them 6 months later and stuff. So like, how do you actually build relationship with people in your community?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And it's something that people have said to me when they're thinking about their own groups or growing their groups. They're like, oh, I don't really want my group to get big because then I'm not going to know everybody. And you can still have relationships with people on scale. There's just there's just different ways to approach it. And then you can save those special one-on-one connections for when they really matter, because your time is not scalable, which is unfortunate, but it's just not. And so you have to be very conscious with how you do those personal relationship building, because there's only so much of it that you can't do. There's absolutely a time and a place to do it. But when your group is growing, there's a lot of people in there. Even if there's 100 people, that's still way too many to have an intimate, personal, one-on-one relationship with. That's way too many people. So some of the ways that I like to do it is I like to use email marketing a lot for that, because it is one-on-one on scale-ish, which is really nice because it's very personal and people can choose to respond to the emails, in which case I do follow up and have some sort of conversation, which is really nice. So that's one really good way to start building relationships, is through email marketing. If you're not already doing that, you definitely should be. But a lot of it just comes through having conversations. I used to try and track everything, and it just becomes so overwhelming. I would write down every single person in my group and did I have a conversation with them and what did they say and blah, blah, blah. And I did like 2 people and I was like, no, I'm done. I can't do this. This is so impractical. This is not working. So I take a much more like natural approach to it now. And I really just do it based on like intuition or I guess Holy Spirit guidance is a much more accurate way of describing what it is. But I have conversations, and if people are on my mind, I'll like send them a message or follow up with them or something. But I really try and let it be a natural interaction because I think it feels more genuine rather than this manufactured, like I'm following up or it's a copy paste response. I know some people do still like to do that with messages and stuff when people join their group, and I'm not against it completely. I think I just have too many people joining that it's impractical for me to do that now. But if people are joining and you want to send them a message, you can. They're probably not going to see it because it's going to go into their spam folder because that's just how Facebook works these days. But you're more than welcome to if that's really important to you to send that message and start that DM relationship if you want. A lot of the times I really just, again, it's funny because everything is so interconnected. A lot of what I do is waiting for people to comment on things. And then I really intentionally will nurture in the comments and the responses. A lot of what I do is like I'm trying to think about 50% of my Facebook strategy is just in terms of responding to comments. I'm trying to think about in terms of how much time I set aside for my strategy. And it's about 50% of my time is set aside to following up with comments or responding to people because that's really where the work is done. And I think it's so important. It's like I have strategies that I like map out and follow, but really it just comes down to being a real person with the people and trying to just build that relationship first and then offering resources when it's appropriate, whether it's podcast episodes or blogs or your offer, if that's the case, if that's the thing that they really need. But all that work really gets done in the relationship building through the comments with the people that are volunteering to interact, right?
I love this advice so much. I'm like a little bit excited maybe to go jump into my Facebook group because I have not been good about it at all. And so it was so funny when Sarah reached out, I was like, oh yes, no, I need to talk to her. I'm like, for my own self. So, all right, what final piece of advice would you give to the women listening if they're like, all right, I want to start a group or have a group and it's dead? What advice would you give them, friend?
Top piece of advice. I think the biggest piece of advice, because there's so many things I could say, my goodness, like how do I narrow it down to just the top piece of advice? But I think it comes back to consistently showing up is the most important thing, whether you are just started and you don't know what you're doing or you've got it there and it's working, not working, like whatever stage of the group journey you're at, you have to be consistent in showing up. It doesn't need to take a lot of time. And that's one of the things that I love about the strategies that I've figured out over the years is I've managed to get it down to something that takes like 15 to 30 minutes per day, which is very time efficient because I do not have a lot of time, right? I have a kid. I'm working like 3 hours a day. So if it takes more than like 10 minutes, I don't want to hear about it. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it has to be consistent because lesson learned when I took my gap from my group and I was just like, see ya, I don't want to be here anymore. And I came back. It was basically, it felt like it was starting from scratch. There were members there because the group was still there. There was still 600 something people in there from whenever I had the group before, but there was it was completely dead because people didn't remember me, didn't know what was going on. They weren't even seeing it. It wasn't showing up in their feeds because there was just nothing going on for 5 months. And so taking those gaps it basically means that your group is suddenly not there in people's feeds anymore. And that becomes a problem. So if you want to accomplish anything with your group, whatever that goal is, it has to be consistent, even if it's like half of a step that you take each week. Not even a whole step, even if it's half of a step that you take each week, it has to be something that you do all of the time to just be consistent with it. And over time, it will start showing up. People will eventually take that first answer. You'll get your first post. And once those things start happening, it really does snowball. But none of that happens if the group is not there for them. And the only way it shows up for them is if you show up for the group. So that's really my biggest piece of advice is like stay consistent and show up for the group. And then the people will show up for you.
I love that advice, my friend. Okay, where can everybody go to connect with you, join your Facebook group? Tell us all the things.
Yeah, all the things. So I have my own podcast called Simple Facebook Group Strategy, and you can go get that at sarahbeisel.com/podcast. It'll take you to whatever platform you prefer to use. And then the same thing, I have a Facebook group called Facebook Group Strategy for Christian Entrepreneurs, and you can find that at sarahbeisel.com/community. It'll take you straight to the Facebook page. You can come join us in those spots and snoop and see what I do and learn from what I'm doing and catch all my resources and stuff from there.
I love it. I will have it linked in the show notes. Guys, go connect with her. I'm going to go stalk all of her stuff because you probably know I have a Facebook group and we're trying to revive it. We're trying to make it a place you want to hang out. So just thank you for being here, friend. I deeply appreciate you.
You're so welcome. This has been so much fun. Thanks for having me.
Hey friend, what a joy it has been to share today's journey with you. If you found a spark of inspiration or a nugget of wisdom that resonated, would you bless someone else by sharing this episode with them? It could be the encouragement they need to step into their purpose and calling. Also, if you could spare a moment to leave a review, it would mean the world to me. I really appreciate your feedback, and it really helps our community grow. Remember, the road to discovering God's call for you isn't one you have to walk alone. So join me again next Monday for another episode where we'll continue to explore the depths of leadership and the heights of our heavenly calling. Until then, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep trusting in His plan. God bless you, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye, friend.